Coming back at you from RGO, Rogue Gorilla Outdoors. Going to go over my first real bow hunting experience. So it's like 2002, 2003, and I'd spent some time hunting in the woods doing early season and didn't see much, hadn't gotten much action at all. It was either the last day of November, the last day of late season hunting, which would have been into like the first week of December. Anyways, I was at work and I was talking to some buddies, and one of them said, "Hey, so and so, he's really big into hunting. Maybe you should talk to him. Maybe he has some ideas about what you could do, you know, for hunting." So I went to him. I was like, "Yeah, I'm not seeing anything. Haven't really done much. I'm just trying to figure out, what maybe I'm doing right or doing wrong." And he asked me where I was going, and I kind of went over where I was going with him. And he's like, "Oh, you should be seeing deer." And I'm like, "Well, I'm not." And he's like, "Well," he goes, "how about when we get off work today, we go out. Come pick me up, and we'll go out." And we did, at that time, was doing 2 to 10:30s. So we get out. I mean, you still had quite a bit of day left at that point. So anyways, I went home, picked up my stuff, went over, picked him up. We got out to my parents' place around probably about 12. And I kind of go, this is the lay of the land, this is kind of where, we'd like to hunt and maybe where we'd end up. She's like, "All right, well, let's start that way." So we go off and we're going up the hill, and there's a bench, and so he put me just onto the bench, and then he kind of stayed just a little bit back, and he started rattling, and we were there for a little bit. Give it, I think, about 10 minutes. Nothing came in. So we went in about 150, 200 yards, and he goes, "I noticed you're standing up when you're there." He goes, "You know how to shoot from your knees?" And I'm like, I don't know. What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, you need to shoot from your knees. It'll help you. You can see underneath the brush better." But I didn't get what he meant. Anyways, so we set up again, and this time I put a tree to my back. I'm kind of leaning up against the tree. He's behind me about 20 yards. He's rattling and kind of doing a doe bleat, and up from the ravine to our right, one doe, two does, three does, and they came like he pointed out where he figured they would come, and sure enough, I mean, they came right from there. And at that time, does were still legal to shoot on your general tag. And I went to draw back, and boy, they were like grease light, and they were gone. But I was stoked because that was probably the most action. I'm pretty sure that was the most action I'd seen that season. And so I was thrilled. I was like, "Oh, that's awesome. This is cool." He's like, "Okay, well, where do you want to go now?" And I said, "Well, we can go down this way. We can go up. There's a lot of good sign on this other side." So we went down the gully, crossed a little tributary, started going up the other side before we hit the other side. Before we hit the top of the other side and out, went into the tree line and stuff from the clearing that's there. We set up again and rattled, but nothing came in that time. Well, we went down, started going down the finger or the ridge southward, back down towards what would lead us towards the creek at the bottom. We got about halfway down that finger, that ridge, and he's like, "Oh, this looks good. We should set up here." I was like, "Okay." So this time he's just right behind me, about 5-10 feet. He tells me, he goes, "Okay, they're going to come from your right and center." He goes, "Yeah, nothing over here. The wind's blowing the wrong direction. The left is not. It's going to be center and your right side." And the right side, it was sloping down that pretty steep in that area, but you could see where there was a couple trails from the right that they could come up, and in center. Well, me being young and knowing everything, I'm sitting there and he's rattling, and I'm still not on my knees. Still don't figure that out yet. Anyways, I think I'm hearing something coming from our left, which I wasn't, because that's where our wind was blowing, and I just didn't listen. But I'm sitting there and I'm looking over to the left, and something catches my eye, and I swing back. This buck is maybe 20, to 15 yards from us, and I mean, he's coming in hot. Eyes just as big as saucers, ears forward. I mean, he thinks he's getting something. Like, yeah, there's something going on, and he wants a piece of it. It scares the both of us. Well, I startle. I start to draw as swinging and drawing. Well, the buck, it's a young little forked horn. He just kind of coming at us. He turns to his left, my right, swings around and just kind of trots. So now he's definitely 20, 25 yards. Trots, broadside shot. Yeah. And I totally, in the whole thing of it, I just blew it. I totally missed the shot and just let the arrow just kind of peter right off the bow. I don't even think I drew back fully. Anyways, it went right underneath him. He runs off. I go check the arrow. There's nothing wrong with the arrow. There's no hair. There's no nothing. So it was a clean miss. And I'm just like, oh, that was awesome. He's like, what were you doing, my buddy? And I'm like, well, I thought I heard something from the left. He goes, I told you there was nothing coming from the left. Our wind was in the wrong direction. I was like, you're right. I'm sorry I didn't listen. You did tell me where it was going to come from. I apologize. Well, we move out to the edge of the finger, or the ridgeline, right as it kind of, there's kind of a little bit of a flat zone, and then it just starts sloping off. And we went out to that, just out to where we were kind of in the middle of that flat zone, and you could kind of see it starting to slope off and go down. And there was some brush off to the left, some brush off to the right, but it was fairly clear. He goes, okay, we're going to sit up here. If we go any further, we won't get a chance to bring anything to us. So he's sitting there, and we might have been there 2 minutes, and I see legs. And he's sitting there, and my buddy's like, he's behind me to my right, squatted down up against the tree, and he's kind of sitting on the ground, squatted there. And he's like, oh, it's a nice 3-point. He goes, oh, man. He goes, it's a good buck. Well, all I can see is legs. I can't see nothing. And I see him move through. He gets in with about 20 yards, and I had a chance at that point to get a vital shot, but I still couldn't see what it was. So I'm literally would have just been going off of what my buddy was telling me, and I didn't feel comfortable doing that. So we let him go. I was like, well, that's cool. Let him go. And my buddy was like, if you would have been on your knees, you could have seen. I was like, what are you talking about? Well, hindsight's 2020. He was like, well, you just, it's like a wrestler's position. You just get down on your knees and you shoot from this position, which I'd never done, so I don't even know if it would have worked out for me or not. But I can tell you what did happen after that is when I'd go to the range, I'd shoot from kneeling position, or on your knees position, at least 2 or 3 times during the session of being out at the range with the bow. It's an important tool to have. It gets you underneath that brush, gives you a better, eye on what's coming in. It's just a very helpful tool. So if you've never done that, you should do that. It's a good thing to put in your toolbox. But yeah, that was probably my first real experience bow hunting, and that sealed the deal. I was all in on the bow hunting from that point forward. Not so much the first season, but definitely the second season, all in on that. I love that time of year. The following 2 years were really good. 2004 to 2005 were really good years. My buddy wouldn't like it if I told the story, but had a buck, named him 7-Step, because that was about how far he was away from my buddy when he blew it. But he was, that was a nice buck. That was a nice buck. A story for another day, maybe. But yeah, that was my first experience, true experience bow hunting. And that's what got me hooked. I was after that, I was hooked. Loved it. But if you want to hear more, stay tuned. I'll have more podcasts up and running, and maybe dive into some of this political hunting stuff about shed antlers and game camera bands and stuff like that. But just a little more about myself. Hope you enjoyed, and till next time.